Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar featuring an important talk by Professor Xiaoxing entitled Scientific Espionage, Open Exchange, and American Competitiveness. My name is Marty Gelfand. I'm on the faculty of the Physics Department at Colorado State University, which is co-hosting this event along with Colorado State University's College of Natural Sciences and Office of International Programs. In just a moment, I'll be handing the virtual mic over to my colleague, Carl Patton, to introduce the speaker. But first, I want to thank APA Justice, and particularly Stephen Pei and Jeremy Wu, for technical support that made this webinar possible. I also want to bring to your attention the question and answer element of this webinar. If you have any questions for Professor Xi, please type them into the Q&A. You can do that at any time. After Professor Xi has finished his talk, I'll serve as the moderator for the question and answer session. Professor Patton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marty. I'm Carl Patton. I am also a Professor Emeritus in the Physics Department, and I too am very grateful to International Programs and the College of Natural Sciences for helping to co-host this, and APA Justice for doing all the technical support and the Zooming. It's wonderful. We're really honored to have Xiaoxing here today. He's one of the standard bearers for this issue that has become very important for university and academic freedom in general. Professor Xi was recently awarded the American Physical Society 2020 Andrei Sakharov Prize. He's the Laura H. Carnell Professor of Physics at Temple University. From 1995 to 2009, he was Professor of Physics at Science and Engineering at Penn State. After receiving his PhD in physics from Peking University and the Institute of Physics Chinese Academy of Sciences in 1987, he did research at Karlsruhe Nuclear Research Center, Germany, Bell Communications Research, Rutgers University, and the University of Maryland. His research focuses on material physics of oxides, boride, and two-dimensional dichalcogenide thin films. He's the author of over 340 referred journal articles and 3 U.S. patents in the area of thin films of high-temperature superconductors. He's a fellow of the American Physical Society. Since 2015, he has spoken out actively for open fundamental research and against racial profiling. We're very honored to have Xiaoxing here today. And I'm going to pass this over to him so we can hear his important comments. Thank you, Xiaoxing.
Thank you, Marty and Carl, for the kind introduction and for inviting me to speak here. I want to thank Colorado State University and APA Justice for hosting this webinar to give me the opportunity to talk about a subject of great importance and urgency, science espionage, open exchange, and American competitiveness. To put the subject in historic context, we need to recognize that the relationship between the United States and China has entered a new era. This is reflected in policy declarations of both the Trump administration and the Biden administration, whom agree on the tougher stance on China. This position has broad support from the American public. According to a Pew Research Center survey published a few days ago, the majority of Americans support getting tough with China on human rights and economic issues, as well as limiting Chinese students studying in the US. We're living in the US-China relationships dramatically different than just a few short years ago. And we will be living in such an atmosphere in a long time to come. One area that has been a major focus of the government is federally funded research. Right before leaving office, former President Trump issued a National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM 33, directing federal agents, universities, and individual scientists to protect national security in government-funded R&D from interference and exploitation by China. It was accompanied by a document from the National Science and Technology Council listing a series of recommended practices. This followed many criminal prosecutions of university professors who allegedly failed to disclose their ties with China in their grant proposals or conflict of interest forms. In 2018, the Department of Justice established a China initiative to prioritize economic espionage cases related to China. On DOJ's China Initiative website, you'll find 10 cases against university professors as of February 11, 2021, not including the recent case of Gang Chen of MIT. 8 of the 10 charged, or 9 of the 11 if we include Gang Chen, are ethnically Chinese. None of the cases alleges theft of intellectual properties, and all are about not disclosing activities in China. The crime charged include false statements or false claims for non-disclosure, wire fraud when you use emails, grant fraud when you have federal grants, and the false tax return. Among these cases, 2 cases have received significant attention. On January 28, 2020, Harvard chemistry professor Charles Lieber was arrested and charged with lying to the FBI and Harvard about his China ties. On January 14th of this year, MIT mechanical engineering professor Gang Chen was arrested and charged with hiding work for China in his grant proposal. When the federal government charges someone with crimes, it is natural for people to think that the charges are the fact and he or she must have done something wrong. But it is very important to remember, 1, the person charged is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And 2, what the government charges, for example, Lieber was paid $50,000 per month by China, and Gang Chen sent an email to himself detailing his work for China, are not necessarily true. I say this because I was the subject of a similar news story and saw with disbelief how the government charged me with things totally false. In the early morning before 7 o'clock on May 21st, 2015, I was woken up by loud pounding on my door. I ran to open the door and saw many people outside my house. Some were armed and some had battering ram ready to take down my door. An FBI agent showed me his badge, asked for my name, and announced my arrest. Another agent turned me around and put the handcuffs on me. I was shocked and asked the FBI agents for what I was arrested, and they wouldn't tell me. In the meantime, the armed agents in bulletproof vests burst into my house, running about and shouting, "FBI, FBI." They pointed their guns at my wife and 2 daughters and ordered them to walk out of their bedrooms with their hands raised. I was worried how frightening this must be to my wife and daughters. My younger daughter was only 12 years old at that time. When the FBI agents took me out of my house in front of my family, I had no idea when I would see them again. The headlines at the time read that the Justice Department charged me as a Chinese spy, selling sensitive technology to China. The sensitive technology I was charged with stealing was a device called pocket heater. The indictment against me said that a US company, STI, invented the pocket heater that revolutionized the field of superconducting magnesium diboride thin film growth, and I stole it for Chinese government entities in an effort to help them become world leaders in the field of superconductivity. The charges were totally false. I had never shared STI pocket heater information with anyone in China. In addition, this pocket heater was not sensitive at all, and there is nothing revolutionary about it. It was a widely known device originally invented by a German professor. It was not classified, not a trade secret, and not export controlled, and it has little commercial value. There were 4 counts against me based on 4 emails I sent to Chinese colleagues from my Temple University email address. Count 1 confirms that certain technology has been delivered to a laboratory in China. But a certain technology was an equipment built by collaborators at Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics, or SciNet, based on published results from my lab, and it had nothing to do with the pocket heater. Counts 2 to 4 was not even about magnesium diboride, but completely different materials. They were about oxide and had no use for the STI pocket heater for magnesium diboride. Being innocent does not automatically mean that I will be exonerated. I was fortunate to have found a team of great lawyers for my defense. My lawyer contacted top experts in my research field, as well as a co-inventor of the pocket heater, and gave them all my email communications with Chinese colleagues. After examining these emails, they all concluded in their affidavits that I did not share the pocket heater technology with China. Armed with these affidavits, my lawyer gave 48 slides presentations to the government on the science of the case. And I'm showing you a couple of slides here. They told the prosecutors and FBI agents that the tube heater I discussed with colleagues at Synap, shown on the left, is unrelated to the STI pocket heater, shown on the right. They don't even look similar. They have different principles, different designs, and different usages from each other. They told the government that magnesium diboride is not an oxide. An oxide contains oxygen atoms in its chemical formula, and there is no oxygen atoms in magnesium diboride. Oxide needs oxygen in the thin film growth, while we want to avoid any oxygen in the deposition of magnesium diboride. At the end, my lawyer made a request to the government. Find out your own expert, give them all my communications with Chinese colleagues, and ask, is there any evidence that Professor Xi shared any pictures, drawings, or schematics of the STI MGB2 pocket heater? We also shared with the government a draft motion to dismiss the indictment, which we were ready to file with the court. It said the government's entire prosecution is based on the presentation of false and misleading testimony to the grand jury, premised on the faulty understanding of basic and non-controversial scientific principles and concepts by an FBI agent who was not qualified to be the government's sole witness before the grand jury. On September 11, 2015, the government dismissed the case, citing additional information came to the attention of the government. On September 17th, I went to my lab for the first time in 4 months. My group welcomed me back with a bouquet of flowers, and we were so glad to see each other again. However, my life and my career would never be the same again. Although the charges was dropped, the false prosecution wrecked my life and that of my family. One day, I was a respected researcher and department chair. Overnight, I was painted as a Chinese spy all over the news and the internet, and faced the possibility of up to 80 years in prison and a $1 million fine. I could not appear on campus, could not talk to my students, and I was no longer the principal investigator of my research grant. We were isolated and worried about my career, reputation, our livelihood, the mounting legal fees, and even my personal safety. In those months, we went through a roller coaster of emotions: outrage, defiance, disbelief, sadness, frustrations, and despair. The extreme stress has left permanent marks in our mental and physical health that we are still experiencing today. Once we know how the government prosecutes innocent people like myself, our peace of mind is forever gone. We are now living under constant concern that the government is still reading my emails and listening to my phone calls, and anything I do could be twisted as a reason to charge me. On the other hand, this nightmare also gave me a sense of obligation to tell people about what had happened to me and the lessons I learned from this horrific experience. Lesson number 1, when you see a DOJ news release charging someone for stealing secrets for China, it is not necessarily true. In my case, what the government said was totally false. Before my case, I could not imagine that the government would charge someone with serious crimes without a thread of truth in their evidence. But that was precisely what they did to me. Lesson number 2, innocent Chinese American scientists are being unfairly targeted. There is a pattern for innocent Chinese scientists to be charged, only for the charges to be dropped or the case collapsed. Before my case, there were National Weather Service hydrologist Sherry Chen and Eli Lilly biologist Guoqing Cao and Shuyi Li. After my case, there were Michigan State University Ning Xi, Tulane Professor Ahab Misselhi and Ke-Lin Hu, scientist Xin Zhao, and a visiting scientist at the University of Virginia, Haizhou Hu. It is extremely rare for the government to drop cases, yet there are so many drop cases involving Chinese scientists. The third lesson I learned from my experience is that the DOJ is criminalizing academic collaborations with China. It was clear to me during my interrogations by the FBI agents that they knew nothing about how science is done, and they saw routine academic activities as criminal. According to a member of DOJ's China Initiative Leadership and Steering Committee, academic collaborations with China is by definition conveying sensitive information to the Chinese. To be clear, we are not denying there is foreign influence by China on American research. However, the scientific community is a critical participant in the federally funded R&D and need to have a voice on such important science policy issues. One document that represents the voice of the scientific community is the Jason Report on Fundamental Research Security, a report of a study commissioned by the National Science Foundation and published in December 2019. Jason is an independent group of elite scientists which advises the US government on science and technology matters, mostly of a sensitive nature. All Jason members have security clearances and access to classified information, and they can speak on behalf of the scientific community to the US government. With all the classified law enforcement information available to them, the Jason Group did a detailed assessment of how China influences American research, which includes rewards, deception, coercion, and theft. They concluded that these actions occur to some degree, but how frequently they occur is not clear. The picture of foreign influence on fundamental research is far from complete, but the threat is there. It can be addressed within the framework of research integrity, not by walling off fundamental research. The Jason Report made 9 recommendations. Expand research integrity to include full disclosure of actual or potential conflicts of interest and commitment, and communicate the requirements clearly to all stakeholders. Included in ethics education and training, in particular for foreign researchers. When the requirement to disclose is violated, the funding agencies and universities should investigate and adjudicate it with consequences similar to scientific misconduct. In my opinion, the Jason Report presented a fact-based and a balanced solution to a serious problem and should be the basis for our national policy on scientific relationship with China. However, there are many falsehoods propagated by some politicians and law enforcement officials that need to be debunked. Falsehood number 1, Chinese students, academics, and the students are non-traditional collectors for China.
There are a slew of what we call non-traditional collectors, businessmen, scientists, high-level academics, graduate students, et cetera, people who are not intelligence officers by profession, but who are, for a variety of reasons, working on behalf of the Chinese government.
In other words, they are Chinese spies. Former Secretary of State explained it in a very stark term.
We know, too, that not all Chinese students and employees are just normal students and workers that are coming here to make a little bit of money and to garner themselves some knowledge. Too many of them come here to steal our intellectual property and to take this back to their country. Communist China is already within our borders.
Chinese students and employees are not normal students and workers. Communist China is already within our borders. Joseph McCarthy said the same in the 1950s. Communists hold US jobs. During the McCarthy era, many innocent Americans lost jobs, saw their careers destroyed, and some were imprisoned. Let's hear Joseph McCarthy speak.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. Even if there is only one communist in the State Department, there will still be one communist too many. These words resonate with what we are hearing today. The question is, are Chinese professors, scientists, and students spies for China? The Jason Report answered unequivocally, no. It said that Chinese scholars, either Chinese citizens or US citizens originally from China, are typically not acting as representatives of the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government, and are not necessarily in agreement with the aims, methods, or policies of those institutions. They must be treated as fellow residents or citizens of our country and should be judged on their personal actions and not by profiling based on the actions of the government and the political institutions of China. No matter what America's China policy is, whether the two countries are in a Cold War or hot war, it is wrong for the law enforcement to profile Chinese students, scientists, and professors based on where they come from. Falsehood number 2, Chinese students steal American intellectual property back to China.
It's a scandal to me that we have trained so many of the Chinese Communist Party's brightest minds to go back to China to compete for our jobs, to take our business, and ultimately to steal our property and design weapons and other devices that can be used against the American people. So I think we need to take a very hard look at the visas that we give to Chinese nationals to come to the United States to study, especially at the postgraduate level in advanced scientific and technological fields. You know, if Chinese students want to come here and study Shakespeare and the Federalist Papers, that's what they need to learn from America. They don't need to learn quantum computing and artificial intelligence from America.
We hear it repeated by former Secretary of State.
The Chinese Communist Party knows it can never match our innovation. It has state-owned enterprise. It's an authoritarian regime. It is a government-centric focus. It's why it sends 400,000 students a year to the United States of America to study. 400,000 students a year studying in our universities come from one country. It is no accident. Much of the high-end industrial base inside of China is based on stolen technology or technology purchased from other nations. It's not homegrown.
Chinese Communist Party sends 400,000 students a year to the US to steal technology for China. Nothing can be further from the truth. First of all, the majority of the Chinese students in the US are not funded by the Chinese government. Second, under the supervision of their advisors, graduate students are the people who actually create discoveries and inventions in America. Then after the students from China got their PhDs, according to this study, an overwhelming majority, 90%, stay in the US, contributing to American economic and national security. Many become American citizens. The Jason report said that foreign students are critical to our domestic research enterprise, and some universities' graduate program likely could not maintain their high level of excellence without them. There are many ways to measure the contributions students from China make to America. Here I show members of National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine who were students from China and are now leaders in academia and business in the United States. Along with immigrants from all over the world, students from China help to make America stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Falsehood number 3, academic collaborations allow China to leapfrog American research, helping China to take advantage of the taxpayer funding.
The research they're taking over to China isn't just going toward academic purposes. That wouldn't be right either, because our taxpayer dollars are going in to fund this research. They're then leapfrogging us by getting that research.
In other words, academic collaborations with China are bad for America. That is not true. Many US funding agencies run collaborative research programs with China. In this 2012 report to the Congress, the Department of State said that US-China science and technology cooperation accelerated scientific progress in the United States, providing significant direct benefit to a range of US technical agencies. NSF established the PIRE program in 2005, jointly funding research projects with funding agencies of many countries, including China's Ministry of Science and Technology. Because international engagement is critical to keeping the US globally competitive at the frontiers of knowledge. The former head of the NSF Beijing office said, US scientists can access world-class facilities, unique geographic sites, and expertise in a growing numbers of fields by collaborating with Chinese colleagues. She added that NSF funding can be leveraged in coordinated partnership with China. In other words, scientific collaborations with China enhances the impact of taxpayer money, leading to more science and engineering breakthroughs. NIH ran a US-China program for biomedical collaborative research since 2006 to stimulate collaborations with China. In 2014, the NIH director told an audience at Fudan University in Shanghai, quoting Louis Pasteur, that science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity. Falsehood number 4, US colleges and universities turn blind eyes to Chinese espionage.
Our nation's colleges and universities are so addicted to the tuition money and research grants that pour in from Chinese students and destructive spy programs like Thousand Talents and Confucius Institutes that they turn two blind eyes to the espionage that regularly occurs on their campuses.
In this FBI document published in 2019, the FBI warned US universities that the Chinese government targets Chinese professors, students, and scientists on their campuses to entice them to steal secrets for China. In an APS News backpage commentary, the American Physical Society leadership pointed out that that FBI document does not provide cases of threat relating to unclassified basic research in academia. The fact is that most of us professors do not do secret or sensitive research. What we do is the so-called fundamental research. The principle of freedom to publish and disseminate is so essential to US universities that most of them do not accept the money if the funding restricts its faculty from publishing and disseminating their result. For universities that do classified research, there are well-established protocols to protect it. Here at Colorado State University, classified research is normally not permitted, but it is allowed when circumstances so warrant. And there are various restrictions and procedures that govern such research. The Jason report described the National Security Decision Directive 189 issued by President Reagan in 1985 in dealing with the national security threat posed by the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. NSDD 189 established a national policy for controlling the flow of science, technology, and engineering information produced in federally funded research. It established a clear distinction between fundamental research and classified research. It has been reaffirmed by the Bush administration and Obama administration, and it is still operative as our national policy today. NSDD 189 defined fundamental research as basic and applied research in science and engineering, the result of which ordinarily are published and shared broadly within the scientific community. It said it is the policy of this administration that to the maximum extent possible, the products of fundamental research remain unrestricted. If national security requires control, then the research should be classified. In terms of basic research and applied research, there are clear definitions in federal policies and regulations. For example, basic research studies fundamental phenomena and or observable facts without specific applications in mind. Most professors who receive funding from the Department of Defense work on basic research, or the so-called 6-1 research. The NIH director said it best about the fundamental research in this interview.
Let me ask you a couple questions on the vaccine. First of all, this hacking issue that apparently the Russians were behind, was NIH targeted, and did you guys lose any key information?
And certainly we are always under cyber attacks of various sorts. But I would say most of what we do in science, we publish it. We put it out there. People don't have to go hacking to find it. We're all about transparency. So I'm not exactly sure what serious risk is involved here. Mischief, yes, but serious risk, I'm not so sure.
Most of what we do in science, we publish it. You don't have to steal it. The concept of stealing open fundamental research is a totally nonsensical contradiction. Falsehood number 5, we need to control unclassified documents because they create classified documents. Listen to this defense lawyer talk about the 1,000 grains of sand theory or mosaic theory that is widely held by the intelligence community.
But there was much more we have saying called the mosaic theory, which is that you have 5 unclassified documents, and if you put them together, it creates a classified document. Russia wants to steal the one classified document. The Chinese would go out and try and obtain all this unclassified information and put the pieces together. That's why a lot of academics in the non-security world, or as contractors to United States agencies, especially in the national laboratories with the Department of Energy, were always under suspicion.
You have unclassified documents, you put them together, and it creates a classified document. Here, the FBI says, even if the technology and their applications are not currently classified, they could be in the future. So you can be in trouble even when you talk about fundamental science with Chinese scientists. The only safe solution seems to be not to talk at all, or a complete academic decoupling from China. On November 18, 2019, a Senate subcommittee released a staff report on threat to the US research enterprise. It recommended that the administration should consider updating NSDD 189 and implement additional limited restrictions on US government-funded fundamental research. Federal agencies must assess whether openly sharing some types of fundamental research is in the nation's interest. It is clear that open fundamental research is facing an existential threat. I want to cite the statement on security in the science by the National Science Board in October 2018 to emphasize the critical importance of openness to fundamental research. It said fundamental research is built on open exchange of ideas and information. These scientific values mirror American ideals of freedom, a combination that has helped our country lead the world in technology, driven our economy, and that in turn protects our freedom. It quoted NSDD 189. The strengths of American science requires a research environment conducive to creativity, an environment in which the free exchange of ideas is a vital component. It also quoted National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. The key to maintaining US technological preeminence is to encourage open and collaborative basic research. The linkage between the free exchange of ideas and the scientific innovation, prosperity, and US national security is undeniable. The Jason report took a strong position on this issue. It said NSDD 189, which makes clear that fundamental research should remain unrestricted, is America's national policy and should be reaffirmed. No new restrictions using intermediate level boundaries should be established. Falsehood number 6, non-disclosure of China ties has to be criminally prosecuted. Here, the US attorney in Boston addresses the cases of Charles Lieber.
The core of the allegation against him is that he lied about this to federal authorities, including investigators from NIH and DOD, when they asked him about it, and that is a crime. And so, in light of that case, a lot of questions we've gotten revolve around, well, is it illegal for academics in the United States to collaborate with their counterparts in foreign countries? And the answer to that is no. And again, this has caused some confusion because while that is allowed, lying about that activity to federal authorities when you're required not to is not allowed.
While failure to disclose China ties is wrong, is criminal prosecution the right response to such actions? The Jason report addresses the issues of failure to disclose conflicts of interest and the conflict of commitment. It said that what should be reported is not always clear, and the requirements for disclosure must be clearly communicated to everyone involved. In terms of failure to disclose, the Jason report said that it should be investigated and adjudicated by funding agencies and the universities, with consequences similar to those currently in place for scientific misconduct, such as demotion, dismissal, and debarment. Only willfully supplying incorrect information as part of a disclosure should be treated as a crime. So unless willfully deceptive, failure to disclose should not be prosecuted, in particular when the rules of disclosure were different or not clear. According to the DOJ's Justice Manual, the grounds for declining prosecution include when there exists an adequate non-criminal alternative to prosecution. The Jason report clearly concluded that there is a non-criminal alternative to the criminal prosecution for non-disclosure of China ties, which is investigation and adjudication by funding agencies and universities with consequences similar to those for scientific misconduct. Let's hear what Professor Maggie Lewis of Seton Hall University says.
You look at statements also made by U.S. Attorney Lelling in Massachusetts, where he has said very openly, yes, the China initiative will have a chilling effect, and that's a good thing. So there seems to also be, my reading of that, at least some people involved in the China initiative have said, well, we want to have essentially over-deterrence, that we think we need to have this heavy hammer of the criminal law. And I think that goes against the ethos that is in the Justice Manual, that the Department of Justice, the rules they have long set for themselves.
The heavy hammer of criminal law goes against the DOJ rules. In December 2020, the U.S. Government Accountability Office issued a report on the funding agency's disclosure policies. It finds that government-wide guidance governing the grant process does not specifically mention or define non-financial conflicts, nor does it mention disclosing foreign affiliations, associations, or activities. The GAO report says, in the absence of agency-wide COI policies and definitions on non-financial interests, researchers may not fully understand what they need to report on their grant proposals. Yet we face criminal prosecution if we made an honest mistake in missing some disclosure requirements somewhere. This is scary. Personally, it makes me extremely nervous when applying for federal funding, in particular when the DOJ uses funding to determine the damage caused by your crime. The more federal funding you get, the more serious your crime is. Falsehood number 7, universities should secure their research like the industry does.
You look at people trying to take advantage of others' technology development, what becomes the weak link here? It's academia. Because people come in and out of labs at universities, they want professors and students to come from other countries, and that's beneficial for everyone. But they don't have the same type of safeguards in place that, say, a technology company would that's invested millions or billions of dollars in this research and has an infrastructure to secure that research. Academia is much more loose in how it secures these things, and that emphasis on collaboration tends to leave them vulnerable.
People should understand that academia is not industry, is not government lab. In this book published by Aspen Strategy Group in 2019, former CIA Director John Deutsch wrote, "The risks of loss of technology to China is minor compared to the losses that will be incurred by restricting inquiry on university campuses. The reason is that America's innovation edge results not only from funding and talents, but also a competitive ecosystem." In the same book, writer and historian Walter Isaacson wrote that the triangular relationship between government, industry, and academia creates an ecosystem that helped produce the technological revolution after World War II. Each partner has its unique functions, and the universities are where free, open, basic research is conducted. It precedes the preparatory and the classified research at industrial and the government labs. If you crack down the free and open environment in academia and turn university into industrial or government labs, you will destroy the ecosystem that made America competitive in the first place. The former Los Alamos National Laboratory director said it perfectly. You don't want to put all research behind high walls.
We have to create the secrets. We create the secrets, and to create the secrets, you need a totally different atmosphere than from locking them up. We had a system at Los Alamos of what I call short fences and high fences. Keep as much of the laboratory with short fences, and then the stuff that's really classified. You put high fences around them, but don't put a high fence around the whole place, because eventually you won't need a fence because there'll be nothing left inside that others will want.
If you shut down open fundamental research, pretty soon you will have no secret to be stolen. I'm deeply concerned that under pressure, our universities may accept the false narratives of some officials as true.
I've been to all 56 FBI field offices, and I will tell you, I'm struck by the number of offices where universities that 3 or 4 years ago wouldn't have wanted an FBI agent anywhere near campus, to some that now have office space set aside for our people. It's recognition that the information that's being stolen is their information. So it's about protecting their research, their professors, their hard work.
If the academic community does not speak up for openness, it is a real danger that the day you can publish your fundamental research freely and discuss the result openly with colleagues may be numbered. Our universities would become something we do not recognize. I'm glad to see that more and more university leaders and academics are speaking up, defending open fundamental research and international collaborations. We all need to do the same. I want to end by showing you some powerful testimonies by leaders of academia, business, and the Chinese American community at a conference hosted by the Committee of 100 before the pandemic, which are as pertinent today as they have ever been.
We all know that there's a chill in the air for Chinese or Chinese American scientists working in the US.
All of this is backdrop to why we're also here today, which is the increased focus on Asians and Asian Americans and Chinese Americans as sort of the overreach and overreaction of this deterioration of US-China relations.
As I've traveled through the country, I've heard from so many individuals who are afraid of being falsely accused of spying and worrying that they may be racially profiled simply because they are Chinese.
Then there's the case of Professor Xiaoxing, chairman of the Temple University Physics Department, and he'll be speaking later on at this conference. He was charged by the US government several years ago for illegally reviewing to professors in China blueprints of sensitive lab equipment used in semiconductor research. Prosecutors dropped the case when they learned that the blueprints were not of sensitive equipment, but something that Professor Xi had invented himself. What's more, before the charges were filed, the designer of this sensitive equipment told the FBI that the blueprints were not for his sensitive equipment. And yet the FBI still arrested Professor Xi.
I get calls almost on a weekly basis, sometimes several in a day. And then, obviously not every day, but from professors who are Chinese American, who are they're being contacted sometimes by agents who come by their offices and they want to question them about their contacts with China. They have some affiliations. Most of these affiliations, they do papers at these universities, they're published, they're on their bio, on their CV. Now, maybe it's not in a grant application because of sloppiness or they don't understand it was required. But from my perspective as a defense attorney, there's no effort to hide this.
Currently, history is repeating itself. And in the 20 years since Wen-O-Li, where they were focusing on nuclear weapons technology, now we're into bio-life sciences, cancer drug research.
You don't have to do anything wrong to be charged by the government as Chinese spy.
This has created quite a bit of anxiety, as others have adverted to already this morning, about the apparent stigmatization of ethnic Chinese faculty members across American higher education.
A governmental overreaction, escalating visa restrictions, the gray area of sensitive research, which is neither classified nor unclassified, the stereotyping and demonization of individuals from particular nationalities or ethnicities, as felt already by some of our Chinese colleagues, will hurt ourselves as much as anyone else.
Asian Americans are just that. We are Americans.
As Chinese Americans, we're proud of our heritage and contributions of our ancestors to world civilization. But like the Irish Americans who celebrate St. Patrick's Day or Latinos who celebrate Cinco de Mayo, our pride in our heritage does not mean we are any less patriotic or loyal to America.
Silicon Valley would not exist as it does today without the contribution of Chinese and Chinese Americans.
Are we going to see the last generation of people who came here, got PhDs here, loved the country, stayed here, and have contributed to the technological power, if you will, of America?
The increasingly hostile environment toward ethnic Chinese researchers and scientists has made some of the most promising of them leave the United States, depriving American science and technology and our businesses of the inventors and the innovations of the future.
There is espionage at the industrial level. There's no denying that. But the real issue in my mind is, how much does it leak over into academic espionage of things that ultimately get published?
Science, by definition, is global. And for us, in the medical sciences, we took an oath to apply our knowledge to all.
It may seem tempting to try to protect ourselves by putting boxes around our researchers and our countries, to attempt to constrain the transfer of scientific discoveries and technological innovation. Research is utterly ineffective in that mode.
It is stated in writing in the policies, let's say, of Science Magazine and most of the other journals. If it's found you publish something, but you're going to keep it all a secret, and you have some materials, you are required to make it available. And now the NIH is saying, oh, by the way, you might have to ask permission.
I believe that we should double down on American openness, open society, market economy, not put political restrictions in the way of our capital markets, our business activity, our technology cooperation, and especially our science and technology collaboration, not just because it's our advantage, but because that's what we all value about America.
We cannot play police within our universities. Our universities are inherently open. They're places where people mix and where that incredible creativity comes loose by that very mixing of students from different countries and different backgrounds.
The consequences of federal government asking university to monitor its students and scientists are pernicious. This violates the core tenet of academia, violates the core tenets of our nation.
Policies or political discourse that serves to reduce the contributions of Chinese and Chinese Americans would be catastrophic for our economy.
We do not have an epidemic. We have a few problems. The danger when you have a few problems is that it's very easy to come up with a cure, which is worse than the disease that exists. Very dangerous. Those cures would undermine this country's scientific leadership. It would undermine our ability to be a technology and talent magnet for the world. And that, in the long term, will destroy U.S. leadership in science and technology and have dramatic implications for our economic and national security.
As universities that are the home to many of these scholars, we have a responsibility and the position to speak up for our shared values in service to our mission, to our governments, and to the international community.
To summarize, I hope my talk has succeeded in dispelling some frequently heard false narratives. No, the majority of Chinese scientists, academics, and students are not spies for China. Students from China create knowledge while they are students, and the majority of them remain in the US. Most professors do fundamental research, which is open according to our national policy NSDD 189. According to the US government, scientific collaborations with China provide significant benefits to America. Open fundamental research is key to US technological preeminence and should not be restricted. For non-disclosure of China ties, Jason report recommended a non-criminal alternative, which is to treat it as violations of research integrity with consequences similar to scientific misconduct. Universities are not industry, and cracking down on openness in academia will destroy US innovation ecosystem. In the name of securing taxpayer-funded research, the policies that deprive US universities of Chinese students, persecute leading researchers who collaborate with Chinese colleagues, make it untenable for Chinese scientists to have a life and a career in the US, pursue complete academic decoupling with China, and restrict open fundamental research on university campuses are in fact destroying American science and technology. I urge everyone to rally around the Jason report, which represents the voices of the scientific community, adequately addresses the foreign influence on fundamental research, and should be the basis for our national policy on scientific relationship with China. There is an urgent need for all of us to speak up, to defend Chinese scientists against injustice, to safeguard open fundamental research on university campuses, and to protect America's research enterprise from irreparable damages. If I can convince you to join this effort, then the ordeal my family and I had gone through would not be in vain. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Xi. Take a minute to let people get questions into the Q&A before we start. Actually, we have one right now, so let me ask this first. Have you seen recent recommendations from the Joint Committee on the Research Enterprise, the JCOR report? And if so, how do you feel about them in comparison to the Jason report?
Can you repeat the name of the report?
JCOR, the Joint Committee on the Research Enterprise.
Is this the White House office report?
Well, let's see that. It's a report by the GAO, I believe. No, this is different. Again, this is coming from a question that was posed, so I do not know the JCOR report itself.
When was it issued? I may know of it, but the name doesn't. Does not sound very familiar.
Since this was posted by an anonymous attendee, if that person, okay, it came out in January 2021.
Mm-hmm. So, I may have read it, but I do not remember the name. Who is the author of that report?
And I'll wait for the anonymous attendee perhaps to follow up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember it by this name.
Okay. So it is from the Office of Science and Technology Policy.
Okay. The report or the recommendations that I mentioned at the beginning, that comes together with the presidential memorandum. If I may share my screen.
Yes, we see it.
Oh, I mean, somebody is, let me see. I don't know whether that's this report, this blue report. Oh. Okay, so regardless of, so it's from that office. If I think, okay, so this is the one that I mentioned at the beginning. And I think is a good thing to clarify what is allowed and what is not allowed. So because, as I mentioned, a lot of rules are not clear, and then the government is prosecuting people for not following rules which were not clear. That is obviously not helpful. And so that, you know, in that sense, it's a good thing. However, I do have concern about it. And I can speak of my own personal experience. Just recently, we submitted a proposal with a group of colleagues. Oh, we spent huge amount of time making sure that we have the current pending support exact and correct, and we have our conflict of interest complete and exact. So although it is a good thing to have clear rules so people know what they should do and what they should not do, but the message is clear, which is don't collaborate. I think the people who make up these policies, on one hand, having a clear rule is a good thing. You cannot punish people without a clear rule in the first place. However, people should think about the consequences of so many things that people have to do. And it sent a very clear message. You know, for me, for example, I would think, I just don't want to apply for this funding. I mean, why do I want to take these risks? Or I don't collaborate. So simply, I don't collaborate with anybody in China. Why should I? If I miss something somewhere, I'm going to be in big trouble. So I think, you know, that's my comment about this. The most important thing here is the assumption that all these people who collaborate with China are bad people trying to do bad things. I think that assumption is wrong. Because if you assume people are you know, trying to advance science and collaborate in doing so, maybe made a mistake here and there, you point it out. Okay, you should do that. You should report that. And then, okay, fine, I will complete it. And, you know, there won't be felony charges, you know, dozens of years of prison terms and fines. I mean, I think that is what is wrong. Assuming all these people are bad people and trying to do bad things.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a question saying that you'd mentioned there have been long-term impacts on your career from the accusations that were laid against you. What could be done to sort of alleviate the impacts of these, you know, unfair prosecutions on you and perhaps others who've suffered similar fates? Is there anything?
You know, from my own personal experience, there's no way you can alleviate it. For whoever who find themselves in such a situation, it's extremely difficult. You know, for people who have not gone through that, you would not understand what the stress, you know, mental stress, physical stress, financial. I mean, when you are in this situation, it's very, very difficult. And we see many situations also because once you are charged, even if what they charge you is wrong, you know, your emails, your tax return, your bank account, your everything is under the microscope. So even if, you know, what they charge you is dropped, well, have you done anything which is not like a saint? And that can be used to force you to plead guilty. Or, okay, fine, go to trial. Then you have the chance of losing so that you have to go to prison for a long time. and you have to pay a lot of money when the case goes to trial, or you plead guilty to something. So you don't have to go to prison, you don't have to pay fine, you just have to plead guilty to something. So what do you do? So there's no way to alleviate the damage to the people who find themselves in such a situation. So that is my opinion, that the only way we can improve the situation is to all speak up so that this bad policy can be changed, so that you don't have people who, they go after you for maybe, missing something in your conflict of interest forms and so on and so forth, and then throw you into prison. So that is the only way, speaking up and trying to change bad policy. That's the only way we can, we can change the situation.
Follow up about the JSON report. Do you see any signs that the recommendations of that report have been, are going to be implemented? Is there any motion in that direction at all that's visible?
I think the NSF endorsed it to some degree, although the prosecution of scientists who allegedly failed to disclose some China ties has continued. So I hope when all of the academics and basically, if we, that's why I have been talking about this in every opportunity I have, is to let as many people aware of such an issue as possible. So if many people speak up, if the academic community, if the Asian American community, if all communities speak up and tell the policymaker that the policy that they have now is bad for our country and is unfair to Chinese Americans, and so hopefully we can change the policy.
Thank you. Let's see. I believe that's all the questions we have today. So I'd like to thank Professor Shi for this presentation and his time, and for, again, putting out which is, how can I say, was obviously very painful for him personally, and hopefully, again, from this experience can make this country a better place in the long run. And thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for making this possible.
Of course. And again, I'd like to thank the folks at APA Justice and Jeremy Wu and Stephen Pei for making this happen. Carl, do you have any last words before we sign off?
Well, I can't resist to add to what Xiaoxing Shi said about we all need to work for this. To get an answer to one of the questions about how you can make this better, I would urge everybody to read the moving book by Wen-Ho Lee, the scientist Los Alamos, that was incarcerated for, I think, 9 months in 1999 and 2000, under conditions pretty much like a Russian gulag. The book is very moving. It's My Country Against Me by Wen-Ho Lee. It articulates the things that are going on today that Xiaoxing Shi articulated so wonderfully. And Xiaoxing, I'd like to thank you again for all the work you're doing on this issue.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for attending.